Hello, Haunted Family. Welcome back. Story 1. The Little Boy. My youngest woke me up, crying about a bad dream he was having. It was 3 a.m. He was 4 at the time. I calmed him down, and then he told me he was hungry, so we went into the kitchen for a snack. He was sitting there, eating cereal, when he just kind of looks up and then casually tells me the boy who woke him up is sitting in the corner crying. He nods to an empty corner of the room by the table where we're seated. I asked him why the kid was crying, just kind of humoring him. And then he tells me, "Mommy, he crashed the car up the road, and now he's trying to figure out what's going on. He woke me up. Please tell him he has to go." So me, thinking that my kid is just still shook from a bad dream, look at the corner and say, "Hey kid, go back to your mom." We keep sitting there, and my son finishes his cereal, hands me the bowl. Just kind of joking, I ask him if the kid was still around, or if he had left. He looks at me, all serious like, and says, "Yes. He told me the ambulance is coming, so it's okay. They're all dead anyways." Not even a minute later, a string of cop cars and ambulances go by our house, sirens and lights blazing. I got this feeling of the most intense dread, while the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I shook it off, told myself it was just my kid's imagination, and a strange coincidence. So we went back to bed. A few days later, our neighbor tells me about this bad wreck about a mile up the street from us. Some lady was going way too fast, flipped the car, coming around a curve. No one survived. It was about 3 a.m, on the night my kid had woke up with that bad dream. I didn't dare ask her if there was a little boy in the car, and I didn't seek out any news articles on the wreck either. Some things are better left unknown. Story 2. The Ranch. The original house on the ranch was built in the early 1800s, and the original family is still there, in a graveyard on the property. When my family first bought the property, the previous owners were still living there for a few weeks until they moved. My grandpa was out riding around, and he saw a guy from a distance dressed in slacks and a white shirt with suspenders on. My grandpa assumed it was the previous owner, so he drove up to say hi. As he got closer, the guy walked behind a bush and seemingly disappeared into thin air. He told the previous owners about it, and they asked, was he wearing a white shirt and suspenders? Apparently, the previous owners saw a lot of this figure, wandering around in the evenings. Almost always exactly where my grandfather had saw him too. A few months later, I was visiting. My cousins and I were playing PS2 or something in the living room. It was around midnight. There's a huge sliding glass door facing the backyard and barn. I noticed 2 people walking around outside that looked like they had rifles with them. It looked almost like they were marching. Eventually they kept going into the darkness, while me and my cousin were scared out of our mind in silence. We told our grandfather, and he went out, and there was no one on the property. Nothing really happened for the next few years, besides footsteps and weird feelings, sometimes strange noises. Occasionally I'd hear footsteps in the night, and since the house freaked me out, I would take this as the opportunity to go into the kitchen for a midnight snack. When I realized that I was the only one awake, and there was no one up making those footsteps, I would quickly run back to my room, terrified. Fast forward to when I lived there during college. I had my own little cabin down the road. One night I had a friend over, and we were up really late. We heard footsteps outside on the gravel. They kept getting closer and closer and louder, and then we heard them on the porch. We saw a silhouette of someone peeking through the window and then walking around. I jumped up to go make sure it wasn't someone trying to break in, or someone needing help maybe. But when I got out to the front yard, there was no one there. It's a fairly open area around my cabin. There's no place for anyone to run or hide. Needless to say, we didn't sleep much that night. Story 3. The people in the hall. Last year, my fiance and I were laying in bed. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning, and we were just waking up. I was fully awake, and had been for about 15 minutes or so. He was in that halfway awake state. He wanted to go back to sleep, kept shutting his eyes, but couldn't quite drift fully off. I remember I kept asking him if he wanted to get up, if he wanted to go to breakfast or lunch, and he kept saying he didn't know yet. I was laying on his left side, closest to our bedroom door, which was shut. My back was facing the door. My left arm was kind of thrown over his chest, rubbing his arm, looking him in the face. He was on his back, facing the ceiling, and all of a sudden, the air, the atmosphere, got really, really heavy, like we were in a pressurized chamber or something. We both felt it at the same time. I started to panic a bit, thinking it was just me, but he opened his eyes and looked at me and said, "Do you feel that? I can't move." I said, "Yeah." I told him that I felt dizzy and that I couldn't quite breathe well. He said, "Yeah, it's like there's something pressing down on my body. What's going on?" I remember staying in that position, just as we were, with my back to our closed bedroom door, just staring at his face, as we both kind of panicked at this weird feeling, and he kept asking me what was happening. Both of our ears just kept popping. I remember trying to move or roll over, but I couldn't, and he couldn't move either. And then we heard it. The doorknob to our bedroom started to turn back and forth. Not like someone was trying to come in. The door wasn't locked. But like someone was playing around, turning it back and forth in a perfectly timed rhythm. Back and forth, keeping time. Slowly, because everything felt so heavy, I glanced over my shoulder. It was so hard for both of us to move, like moving through molasses. I could see the doorknob just turning back and forth in that rhythm. And then, 2 young, female, childlike voices started singing along with the rhythm of the turning doorknob. It sounded like they were singing some sort of nursery rhyme type song, but we couldn't quite understand the words. I've never heard it before. All I could make out was something, 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 something dancing. I know that doesn't help, but it repeated that over and over. The only word that either of us could make out was dancing. I stared at my fiance's face the whole time this was happening. His eyes were open so wide. I saw him slowly turn his head towards the doorknob. The look on his face was a combination of shock and terror and disbelief. I'll never forget the look on his face. The fear in his eyes. I've never seen that expression before. He's usually so calm and unflappable. I could tell that he couldn't quite believe what we were hearing, what we were seeing, what we were experiencing. I could tell that he was hearing the exact same thing I was. And I'll never forget the tone of their voices. They sounded so playful. The way I've described it later to our family members was that they sounded like two little girls, maybe doing this to tease or get attention. Like an older sibling or parent had locked them out of a bedroom. My sisters used to do very similar things when I would have shut them out of the bedroom. Then, the doorknob stopped turning as they ended their last stanza of the song. We heard the same voices giggling and squealing, like they were excited at what they just did and knew they got our attention. Then it all stopped. And at that exact time, the singing, giggling, turning of the doorknob, that heavy, pressurized feeling lifted off our body. All of it just went away in an instant. Like someone flipped a switch, and it was all gone. My fiancé whispered to me, "Did that really just happen? Did you hear the same thing I did?" I was shaking, and I said yes. He shot up out of bed, raced to our bedroom door, and yanked it open. He said to me, "You have to come here. You have to see this." I was really scared. I sat up on the bed, terrified of what I was going to see, what he was going to show me. I was shaking so hard. But finally I got up and I went to the door. The air right in front of our door felt weird, like it was swirling. The air felt hot and oily and swirly. From that spot in front of our bedroom door, we could see this trail of mist. It was a white, swirly fog, and it went in a trail through the air from that spot, right in front of our bedroom door, through the living room, into the dining room, into the kitchen, and finally in the laundry room, where, at two huge windows, it just disappeared. It was the most bizarre thing we've ever experienced, and it left me really shaken and unnerved. I actually begged him to stay home from work that day. I didn't want to be alone, but he couldn't take off work on such short notice. So I stayed home alone, literally in the middle of the day with every light in the house on and the TV cranked up really loud. But I still didn't feel alone. I felt like someone was with me, someone was watching me. And I was really jumpy in the house for a long time after that. But thankfully, it never happened again. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, you can drop me a comment down below, hit that like button, subscribe if you want to. I appreciate any and all. Music by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio.